There's a story people sometimes tell about a couple who almost never fought. And when they eventually split up, one of them said something that stuck. I think we spent so much energy avoiding conflict that we never actually faced each other. Here's the thing about conflict. It's not the enemy of love. Sometimes the absence of conflict is the more dangerous sign. We've been taught our whole lives to avoid it. Don't rock the boat. Don't ruin the mood. Don't start something you can't finish. So when tension shows up in a relationship, most of us do the same thing. We push it down. We swallow it. We walk away. And we tell ourselves it's not worth it. Just let it go. But what if that choice, that one quiet moment of backing down, is slowly doing more damage than any argument ever could? That's what we're exploring today. And stay with me, because this isn't just about conflict. It's about what happens to the couples who stop avoiding it, who walk straight into it, and come out the other side closer than they've ever been. Dr. John Gottman is one of the most respected researchers in relationship psychology. He spent decades studying thousands of couples up close, and one of his findings is kind of uncomfortable. Gottman argued that many of the conflicts couples face are at their core not fully solvable, not something that simply disappears with better timing or one more late-night conversation. Different personalities, different values, different ways of moving through the world. No amount of deep talks makes those disappear completely. So then what separates happy couples from unhappy ones? Gottman's answer is simple. It's not whether you resolve the conflict. It's how you handle it together. Let that sink in for a second. Now, before we talk about how to handle conflict well, we need to understand what's actually going on inside. Relationships that look peaceful on the outside. Because here's what most people miss. A calm relationship can mean two completely different things. It can mean genuine peace, the kind built from years of real understanding, real trust, real communication, or it can mean something else entirely. Conflict that's been buried so deep it's invisible. One of them is solid ground. The other is a frozen lake. Psychologists call it conflict avoidance. And it's more common than most of us realize. When you avoid conflict, you might win the moment. No fight tonight, no awkward silence, but you're not resolving anything. You're postponing it. And here's what postponed conflict does. It doesn't go away. It leaks into your tone of voice, into your facial expressions, into the way you respond to the smallest things. You know that moment when someone just leaves their socks on the floor, and suddenly you feel this wave of frustration way bigger than socks deserve? Yeah, that's not about the socks. That's 6 months of swallowed feelings finally finding an exit. Relationship research suggests that couples who habitually avoid conflict often report lower relationship satisfaction over time. And when things finally blow up, they can blow up harder. The surface was calm, but the pressure never stopped building. Avoiding conflict doesn't fix it. It just kicks the can down the road. And eventually, you run out of road. So if conflict isn't the enemy, what is it exactly? The word conflict carries this energy of collision. Two things close enough to touch, close enough to push against each other. And that's the point. You can't collide with someone you're far away from. Conflict at its core is proof that two people are actually sharing space, that the relationship is alive. Here's the thing about people. We're all different. Different upbringings, different emotional wiring, different definitions of what a good relationship even looks like. In the early stages of love, those differences feel exciting. Oh, you see the world completely differently than I do? That's fascinating. But as the relationship deepens, as you start sharing a life together, those same differences start to create friction. And that's when a lot of couples start to panic. If we're this different, are we even right for each other? But here's what that friction actually is. It's the moment the performance stops. The polished version of yourself you showed up with in month 2? It's starting to crack. And what's showing through the cracks is the real you. Conflict is where two people finally start seeing each other without the filter. In many conflicts, there's often an unmet need underneath the surface. When someone says, "You never listen to me," what they're often really saying is, "I need to know I matter to you." When someone says, "Why do I always have to handle everything around here?" what's underneath that is usually, "I'm exhausted. I need to feel seen." Conflict is a window into what your partner actually needs, what they're afraid of, what they're longing for. And the couples who get curious about that window, instead of slamming it shut, they reach a level of understanding most people never get to. Think of it this way. Conflict is like an X-ray. On a normal day, you can't see inside. But under pressure, the structure of the relationship becomes visible. What's strong? What's fragile? What needs attention? The question is, what do you do with what you see? Now here's the part I really want you to hear, because this is where stable, happy couples do something different. Gottman's work suggests that stable, couples tend to keep a much stronger balance of positive interactions even during conflict, often described as roughly 5-to-1, a moment of warmth, a soft touch. I hear you in the middle of the tension. That balance matters more than the mere presence of conflict. When it comes to long-term relationship health, he also identified what he calls the 4 horsemen, the 4 patterns that, when they show up consistently, signal serious trouble: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. Of the 4, contempt is the most destructive. Looking down at your partner, eye-rolling, mockery. When contempt becomes a habit, love doesn't end dramatically. It just quietly drains away. So what do stable couples do instead? First, they pay attention to how a difficult conversation starts. Relationship research suggests that how you start a hard conversation can strongly affect where it ends up. "You always do this" is a very different door than, "Hey, I've been feeling kind of drained lately. Can we talk about something?" The first one puts your partner immediately on the defensive. The second one opens space. The way you start the conversation almost always shapes how it ends. Second, they use I language instead of you language. "You ignored me" versus "I felt invisible and that really hurt." Same situation, completely different impact. The first one is an attack. The second one is vulnerability. And vulnerability, it turns out, is one of the most disarming things a human being can offer another human being. When you stop attacking and start revealing, your partner's walls come down. 'Cause you're not fighting anymore. You're being honest. Third, they know when to pause. When emotions get intense, our ability to think clearly and feel empathy takes a serious hit. This is what researchers call flooding, when you're so emotionally overwhelmed. That clear thinking and empathy take a real hit. Trying to have a productive conversation in that state? It doesn't work. You're just throwing words at each other. Healthy couples recognize this, and they give themselves permission to stop. "I'm getting really worked up right now, and I don't think I can have this conversation well. Can we take 30 minutes and come back to it?" That's not running away. That's protecting the conversation. Fourth, and this might be the most important shift of all, they stay on the same team. When conflict heats up, it's easy to start seeing your partner as the opponent. Me versus you. I need to win. You need to lose. But the couples who navigate conflict well never lose sight of the bigger frame. This is our problem. Not my problem or your problem. Ours. We're not on opposite sides of the table. We're sitting next to each other, looking at the same thing. That reframe, that tiny mental shift, changes everything about how the conversation feels. And then there's this, as Brené Brown has often said, vulnerability isn't weakness. It's where connection begins. In the middle of a fight, saying out loud, "Honestly, I've been scared that you don't love me the way you used to." That is one of the bravest things a person can say. And it can dissolve a wall of sharp words in an instant. Because suddenly, it's not a performance anymore. It's just a person. And we don't respond to armor. We respond to the human being underneath it. Now here's what happens on the other side of all of this. Couples who move through conflict in a healthy way build something you can't fake. A shared history of "we made it through that." And that history becomes the foundation of the relationship. The next time conflict shows up, it's not as terrifying. Because you've been here before, and you know how this ends. People often report feeling a deeper sense of warmth and closeness after working through conflict well. Like the relationship just got a little more solid. The tension created distance, and then the resolution pulled you closer than you were before. That's not a coincidence. It's the whole point. When you go through conflict together, you get to see parts of your partner that the good days never show you. Their fears, their soft spots, their deepest wants. And when you hold those things gently, when you don't use them as weapons, that's when real intimacy happens. Some researchers describe love as changing over time, from desire and passion into something deeper, steadier, and more deeply bonded. A lot of relationships stall out in the passion phase, because when conflict shows up, it feels like the passion is dying. And people mistake that feeling for the relationship ending. But the couples who push through, they reach something on the other side that feels less like butterflies and more like home, not the rush of new love. Something better, the quiet confidence of "I know you, you know me, and we're still here." Think of it like a kind of emotional resilience. Relationships don't become strong by never being tested. They become strong by facing stress and learning how to recover together. A relationship that's been protected from all conflict might feel smooth, but it's fragile because it's never been tested. A relationship that's been through real conflict and came back from it has roots. It's been through something, and that matters more than you might think.
Now, if you're someone who's in the middle of a conflict right now, and you're exhausted by it, I want to say something to you. Conflict showing up doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. It might mean two people are finally close enough to show each other who they really are. And if you're someone whose relationship feels almost too calm, and you've been wondering whether that's a good thing or a worrying one, that's worth sitting with too. The question was never do we fight. The real question is, who do we choose to be when things get hard? Do we become the person who attacks or the person who tries to understand? Do we play to win or do we play to connect? Do we tear down or do we build something together? Those choices made again and again are what determine what your relationship looks like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20. There's an old saying, love means never having to say you're sorry. I'd push back on that. I think love means being willing to say it and meaning it, and then choosing every single time to come back to each other. Conflict isn't always the end of love. Handled well, it can become one of the places where love deepens. And the couples who know that, they know something most people never discover, that the sky after a storm is always a little clearer, a little more vivid than any sky you'll see on a calm day. If something in today's video made you think about your own relationship differently, I'd love to know. Drop a comment below and tell me what hit home. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. I'll see you in the next one.